Hey there everyone, my name is Brian Tashner. I'm a cardiologist in Fort Myers, Florida. In addition to cardiology, I'm a fitness enthusiast and I love cooking and I love eating good food. So I'm an avid home chef, if you will. I'm the creator of the Vibrant Beat, and my website, vibrantbeat.com, was made not only for my patients but for people in the community, around the country, and even around the world to learn more about how a plant-based diet can influence prevention and treatment and even reversal of chronic disease. Not only do I provide some articles on food as medicine, but I'm also trying to create recipes and link recipes to other websites that everyone can cook and enjoy without too much difficulty. So one of the things that I always get asked when I speak to patients or other people about consuming a plant-based diet or transition to more of a plant-based diet is, how do you get enough protein? And first of all, when people transition to a plant-based diet, it's not something that they need to do or most of them are going to have success doing overnight. Meaning it's a process. It's a lot different than what most people consume as part of the standard American diet. But back to the protein issue. So there's a common misconception that we need to consume somewhere between 1 and 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And a lot of this is promoted by the fitness industry for people that are really trying to build muscle and bulk up. A lot of people on low carbohydrate diets. That's not really the secret though. We really shouldn't be looking at consuming so much protein. And there's a lot of confusion because this is what people hear from the fitness industry. When you really look at the current USDA guidelines, the recommended daily allowance is only 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. That's a little bit different. If we were going to take a 150-pound person, for example, if we were going to say we'll have 1 gram to 2 grams of protein per pound, that's going to bring us up to 225 to 300 grams per day. If we use the other formula, the 0.8 grams per kilogram, 150 pounds is about 68 kilograms. So when we look at that, we're talking only about 55 to 60 grams of protein a day. When they look at these recommended daily allowances, when they've actually created these, they actually even leave a little room for error, meaning that most people are going to do just fine with even less than that, so about 0.6 grams per kilogram of protein daily. So people really overconsume the amount of protein here and are not necessarily eating great sources of protein. So what makes a good protein? Many people, particularly in the fitness industry, consider animal protein being an ideal protein because it's most like our own, meaning there are 20 amino acids, 9 of which are essential, meaning we have to consume them because our body doesn't produce them. Animal protein is most like our own, so it's very good at helping one to build muscle. But really, what is a good protein? When we look at the most nutritious kinds of proteins, plant proteins come out far ahead. They contain fiber, phytonutrients, multiple vitamins and minerals that are not found in animal protein. Animal protein does not have fiber. That only comes in the form of plant-based foods. When we look at a formula called the Nutrient Density Index created by Dr. Joel Fuhrman, we're looking at the number of micronutrients per the number of macronutrients, which essentially means the number of micronutrients per calorie ingested. And again, plant proteins come out way ahead of animal proteins when we look at the micronutrients contained per macronutrient. In addition, when we look at population studies like the China study, for instance, and there are many other ones out there, the Framingham Heart Study, the Adventist Health Studies, the list goes on. There is a clear correlation between higher ingestion of animal proteins and the future risks of cancer and cardiovascular disease. And in those populations that eat greater amounts of plant foods, including plant proteins, there's a much lower number, in fact a reduction in the number of cases of cardiovascular disease and cancer. And why is it that animal protein can be considered harmful? Well, animal protein in any form, not just red meat. I have a lot of patients come and tell me, well, I don't eat red meat anymore, but even skinless, boneless chicken, white meat, turkey, all animal protein, even low-fat dairy, contributes to elevated levels of cholesterol, and there has been a clear correlation of higher levels of cholesterol, particularly the LDL and the bad cholesterol, and cardiovascular disease. And if you look at the China study again, really the number that had the strongest correlation with adverse outcomes was a high cholesterol level. And they saw that in that study people that ate mostly a plant-based diet had a total cholesterol of typically less than 150, whereas us in America here, total cholesterol usually ran well above 200 on average. One of the things they've seen in a number of studies, including the Framingham ARC study, is anyone that really has a cholesterol naturally less than 150 has a very low incidence of cardiovascular disease. In fact, it's almost absent completely. What are some other ways that animal protein can be harmful? So when cooked at higher temperatures, animal proteins can form something called heterocyclic amines, as well as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Those are big words to say. But essentially, both of these byproducts of cooking animal protein can lead to damage to our DNA. They are oxidants. They oxidize our DNA and cause damage. And as the cells with damaged DNA replicate, that can lead to cancer. On the other hand, we look at plant proteins, they have a lot of these phytonutrients and antioxidants, which really help to prevent cancer. Another benefit of plant proteins is that many of them contain a substance called L-arginine. This is a precursor to a substance called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is created from the inner lining of our blood cells and acts to dilate the blood vessels. And when we dilate the blood vessels, that lowers the blood pressure. And we know that high blood pressure is a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease. In addition, nitric oxide also acts as an anti-inflammatory and thins the blood. Inflammation and thickening the blood are both mechanisms that contribute to cardiovascular disease and stroke. What's another harmful effect of animal protein? Well, when we consume animal protein, the bacteria in our gut produce a substance called TMA. This is converted to something called TMAO in our liver. And this is a substance that's been highly correlated with production of plaque buildup in the arteries. Again, this is part of the process which leads to, you guessed it, heart attacks and strokes. So what are good plant-based sources of protein? Well, remember that all foods are made of 3 macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So really, all of the plant-based foods do have some protein. In fact, pound per pound, broccoli has more protein than red meat. When I look at the amount of protein in various foods, the things that I find to be are really good sources are beans, and there's all kinds of beans: kidney beans, black beans, garbanzo beans. Those are very popular in plant-based eating. Nuts and seeds, so you have your almonds, your walnuts, your hemp seeds, your chia seeds, your flax seeds, and then things like soy. There's edamame beans, there's tofu, there's tempeh. So these are all great sources in addition to all the normal green vegetables or cruciferous vegetables that we may eat that also contain a fair amount of protein, especially if eaten in larger quantities. And remember, we're really only trying to get to about 60 grams per day, or if you're really a vigorous athlete, maybe trying to bump that up a little bit to 70 to 80 grams, but certainly you don't need to get in the range of 250 to 300 milligrams. Now, with plant proteins, there's oftentimes been this myth that, well, they're incomplete proteins, and they are, because really plant proteins do not contain the essential amino acids, all of the ones that we need, and they may not contain them in the same ratio as human muscle. That being said, the body is pretty ingenious. It can actually break down the amino acids and form proteins from those individual amino acids. So even though eating combinations of food, plant-based foods, is important to form a complete protein, the body can do this. You don't need to eat these things at the same time. As long as they're consumed really within about 24 hours of each other, the body can use various plant proteins to make the same complete proteins that we find in human muscle. So to summarize, how much protein do we need? Somewhere between 50 and 70 grams a day is sufficient for most people. Number 2, can we get this much protein from plant sources? Easily, not a problem. Number 3, do we need to eat a combination of different plant proteins at the same time in order to make a complete protein? The answer is no. As long as you consume a variety of plant foods, somewhere within 24 to 48 hours, your body can take these amino acids and form a complete protein. Next, plant proteins have far more micronutrients per macronutrient, so more micronutrients per calorie than animal-based proteins. And we're looking at things like phytochemicals, antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. Lastly, in addition to their cholesterol elevating effect, many animal proteins can be harmful in other ways, such as creation of heterocyclic amines, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and the formation of TMAO, all of which have been associated with higher levels of cardiovascular disease and stroke, and to some degree even cancer. So for the Vibrant Beat, I'm Brian Tashner. I hope you enjoyed my story.